Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with QuinnBet. Well, it's the evening after the night before. Another NFL season in the books just seemed to fly by yet again, didn't it? And a very good evening to those of you watching our live stream on X, on YouTube, on Twitch, and on IrishNFLShow.com. If you're listening back to the podcast in the days after the Super Bowl, thank you for choosing this pod. And please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Kieran O'Donovan and me, Conor Brophy, with you this evening to reflect on Super Bowl 59. Or LIX if you prefer it in Roman numerals. Brian O'Leary, Shane Brennan, Kieran Boyle and Noel Dowling were in New Orleans for the Irish NFL Show last night, of course, and during the build-up to the game at Caesars Superdome. They're all now making their way back home for some well-deserved rest. So it's the two homebirds here keeping it lit for you this evening. Shout out as well again to Craig Rigdon, our graphics supremo, who has put so much into the show again this season, as he does every season. And, really proud watching the live show and all the content coming out during the week from New Orleans and how spectacular it all looked, and all those graphics and all the predictions and all of the look and feel of the promos and all the stuff that goes out during the week. That's all Craig hard at work in the lab, and it's great to see all of that come to fruition, because it's a lot of work and a lot of extra hours for Craig, who's not front of house here and lapping up the rounds of applause in the way that myself, Kieran, and the others are. So yeah, fair play again, Craig, and it's always an absolute joy to have you working with us for everything that you bring to the Irish NFL Show. Right, we start where we should, of course, with the victorious Philadelphia Eagles, Kieran, because you can't take anything away from this team, and ultimately they were deserving winners of Super Bowl 59, no question or doubt.
Absolutely. It wasn't exactly, we spoke there before we came online, it wasn't exactly a Super Bowl for the ages. We were, I guess, spoiled for choice in the last few years, where we've had a lot of close contests. And as a neutral, you go in, there's so much build up and so much hype into these games. You're hoping for a shootout, you're hoping for drama. It didn't play out like that. And to be fair, the credit has to go to the Eagles team from top to bottom. They just showed up and absolutely blew out the Kansas City Chiefs last night. And like we have mentioned, if you're going to beat the Chiefs, that's what you have to do. You have to stamp your authority. You can't expect to hang with the Chiefs and give them a chance late in the game to come back, because we all know, we've talked about Patrick Mahomes' stats when he has the ball with a chance to win a game. So they made well and truly sure that wasn't going to be the case, that this was game over at halftime. And look, as I said, not a Super Bowl for the ages, but even watching it on a second look today, highly fascinating in terms of what the Eagles were able to do, and highly impressive from top to bottom. And I know we'll get into the details now, but for now, like, a huge credit to the Eagles, and fair play to them. Congrats to them.
Because I'm just reflecting on it now, and all we'd said in the build-up to the game, and all we'd been saying about the Eagles even during the postseason, and what we'd said about the Chiefs, to your point. I was doing a radio interview for KCLR over the weekend with a good old friend of mine, Oisin Langan, and he was asking about the odds, and I was saying, well, it's evens with the bookmakers. There'd only been 1.5 points in it, and then it came in, and it was evens at time of kickoff. And I was saying, and I heard the words came out of my mouth, which is kind of nonsense when you consider how good the Eagles are. Like, they really should be favourites. Of course, I had picked the Chiefs because, like you and like many others, you're looking at the Chiefs going, yeah, but we've seen this movie so many times. We've seen them outplayed. We've seen them come up against teams that we thought objectively were better, with more talented players. They don't have Patrick Mahomes, though, and they don't have Andy Reid, and they don't have Spags, and they just don't know how to own those clutch moments in the way that the Chiefs do. They never fail. One thing I heard just before kickoff, though, I think it was Kyle Brandt on the pregame show on NFL Network, saying, if it's a close game, I think the Chiefs win. I don't see the Chiefs blowing out the Eagles, but if it's a blowout, I could see the Eagles blowing out the Chiefs. He said, because they're just so talented. They're just such a good team. And he's saying what a lot of us had been saying. And I was kind of half wavering, of course. This sounds like, great wiseness after the fact, or wisdom after the fact. Now it's half wavering on my pick and going, when you do look at the talent that they're bringing to bear, like, if they click, they're very hard to live with. And the Chiefs have been kind of living on their luck, but just so hard to go against the force that we've seen. But as you say, I think the thing that impressed me was not only how the Eagles, because you said during the Packers game, during the build up to the Packers game, I want to see someone stop Saquon, and I want to see the Eagles have to throw the ball. The Chiefs stopped Saquon. They held Saquon to under 60 yards. if you'd been told that before the game and you were a Chiefs fan, you'd have been rubbing your hands with glee saying, yeah, here comes the three-peat. There's that fourth Lombardi. Thank you very much. And like it just didn't stop the Eagles at all. It wasn't even a speed ramp on their way to victory. It's like, well, have you forgotten that Jalen Hurts played the best game of his career in Super Bowl 57 and somehow managed to end up on the losing side? He can run, he can throw. Yeah, we'll isolate Devontae Smith on the outside. We'll get the ball to Jahan Dotson. You know, we'll make plays in the way that the Chiefs make plays with the guys that you don't expect to make the plays. Oh, and, you know, we can hit A.J. Brown too when we need to do that as well. And we'll find Dallas Goedert in the flat because we're just better than you. We have better players than you do, and we back ourselves to make the plays. You know, you can't talk about the game without talking about Vic Fangio, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think in some ways, it's not that we didn't talk up how good this roster was and how good this Eagles team was, but I kind of feel a little bit embarrassed that we didn't give them enough credit. And some of that was just maybe the way they played, particularly in the playoffs, where you thought the Rams had a shot in them. The Rams kind of had them where they wanted them. You know, I was convincing myself that, well, if they'd had to go to Detroit rather than hosting the championship game at home, maybe we would have seen a different outcome. And the Commanders had shot their shot and beaten the Lions, and that was their Super Bowl. That the Lions, maybe if they'd actually gotten, you know, the ring rust off and beaten the Commanders in the way they would have hoped to, I didn't see the Eagles coming out of that one. And that was how my mind was framing it, was that maybe they just haven't been tested. But they were just ready to rock. Like, they're the ones who looked like they used the 2 weeks that we thought Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo were going to use to cook up something special. They were the ones who had the recipe for success.
Yeah, and going back to your earlier point, I was looking at a text message I sent a friend just before the game started. He asked me what I thought, and the language I used again was all ifs. If the Eagles can avoid making mistakes, and if they can get the early turnovers, and they have a great chance to win. Whereas what we should have been saying, and it's not as if we missed a trick, we've been fully aware of the talent that they have. And even across the American media, you were listening to it, everyone was unanimous in saying that the Eagles were a more talented team top to bottom. But there was that caveat of if, and it was always just because of the aura and the winning history of the Chiefs and the intangible greatness, we'll say, of your Andy Reid, your Steve Spagnuolo, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. That was the fear that everybody had, was, look, this is going to be history repeating itself again. But no, like, to your point, the likes of Saquon Barkley, I listened to Mike Florio. I think it was Mike Florio this morning. I think he said that Saquon Barkley's influence came throughout the playoffs. He influenced the game in what the Chiefs had to do to sell out and stop him. And that's what we talked about. And I've been talking about it for the last few weeks, that someone's going to have to ask the question of Jalen Hurts. Someone's going to have to make Jalen Hurts go and win the game, because you have to stop Saquon. And to your point, they did. I mean, Saquon, he rushed for he 25 rushes for 57 yards. He wasn't lights out. And I talked about the Eagles passing game and how that might be a factor in their success if they were to win. And it's not as if I was hoping that the Eagles would go absolutely pass heavy from start to finish. And credit to Kellen Moore, he didn't. He didn't give in to that temptation. He never left.
This is the guy who, as we said, was drummed out of Dallas by, Mike McCarthy saying, "Oh, he only wants to light up the scoreboard by throwing the ball the whole time." Like, that tag is hung around his neck. Kellen Moore is too pass happy. It turns out he had Saquon Barkley. He's perfectly happy to be run happy.
Yeah, and Hurts only threw the ball 22 times. But what I was hoping for, and what I was alluding to, was, what's the efficiency going to be like? He needed to be efficient in the pass game. And it's almost like the opposite. You needed to establish the pass to have some success and to have the running game be a factor. But to his credit, he had only 4 incompletions or 5 incompletions, and he protected the ball all through the game. The interception he threw early was about as safe a turnover as you could have. It was I'd equate it to a kick to touch in rugby, a really good kick to touch, because you still pinned the Chiefs back within their 5. It wasn't a damaging turnover. I know it wasn't his intention, it was
such a good point, because it wasn't quite a shot to nothing, as you're saying there, but it was a ball he was entitled to throw. You weren't going, oh, he'd want that one back. Like, obviously he wouldn't have wanted to be picked off, but it wasn't the worst pick you're going to see.
No, and he was efficient with the ball. And to be fair, every one of his receivers stepped up. We talked about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. I haven't said, oh geez, I've forgotten his name, Jahan Dotson. I haven't said his name once all season, and he had 2 massive moments. Everybody did their job. Everybody contributed. And I just, like, again, going back to Kellen Moore, and I think what an impressive game he called. They were having this success through the air, and he was just able to mix it up and control the game. He was so composed. And if you look at the drive they had in the third quarter, just after Josh Sweat got again, Josh Sweat, who had a massive game, and we'll come to him, he got a sack just at the start of the second half in the third quarter to stop Mahomes and the Chiefs' drive. And the Eagles took over. There was a sequence where Hurts he had a 16-yard run on 3rd and 5. Then Barkley broke off his first 10-yard plus run. Then Hurts had another big run up the middle, eating up clock, and drawing the Chiefs in. And then he throws on first down to Barkley. All of this stuff he was mixing it up. It was so controlled, so composed. And look, they only got a field goal out of that, but they went 27-0 up. They ate some clock. They stopped. They killed any chance of the Chiefs coming out and, I suppose, lighting a fire or scaring them in the second half. Because, there was a number of these moments where you were thinking, Jesus, if this had gone differently for the Chiefs, all they needed was that spark, that little bit of confidence. But with the Eagles continuously doing their job on offense, and look, we get to the defense, what they were able to do, they had Patrick Mahomes seeing ghosts. Like we talk about Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. Like you saw Mahomes so many times, scramble left, scramble right, and everywhere he looked, he had someone pressuring him. It was an incredible performance.
Yeah. And well, let's talk about that then. And I want to maybe start that discussion about how good the Eagles defense, the number 1 defense in the NFL all season. So it wasn't a surprise that they were this good in the Super Bowl. But I want to talk about it in the context of or through the prism of the MVP award. Now, I'll preface this by saying I don't in any way begrudge Jalen Hurts winning the MVP. He's had so many questions this year because of the way the Eagles have played, because of how good Saquon has been and how much they've relied on him. We talked with Mark Schlereth, and Mark Schlereth was talking in the even ahead of the Commanders game about saying, yeah, I give the Eagles the edge everywhere except a quarterback, where I'd give the rookie Jaden Daniels the edge over Hurts. Going into this game, he's obviously going to be playing second fiddle to Mahomes, and he goes in and bar the interception, really doesn't put a foot wrong. And not only that, he makes some spectacular throws, like a couple of great back shoulder throws to AJ Brown. There's the one to Jahan Dotson, the 27-yarder that was stopped just short and would have been a touchdown pass, but then Hurts gets in on the tush push anyway. He did everything that could have been expected from him, and he's a worthy MVP winner. But it does kind of annoy me that in a game that was decided, in my mind, by the Eagles defense and what they didn't allow the Chiefs to do, and how they set up success for their offense with those picks, with those sacks, with those short fields. You mentioned Josh Sweat's name. He bags 2.5 sacks, and yet we don't get a defensive MVP. And you're looking at that going, what is it actually going to take for a defender to win an MVP? Like if that's not a year when you give it to somebody other than the quarterback, I don't know what the bar is going to be, because it's effectively now just, and it has been for years, just a quarterback award. I think Cooper Kupp was the last non-quarterback to win it. And it's nearly always an offensive player who gets it. But if you've got a defense this good, I suppose probably their curse is that collectively they're so good, it's hard for any one player to stand out.
Yeah, I think if it's going to be a defensive player, it has to be such an obvious defensive game, even on the scoreboard. You go back, I think it's Von Miller is the last defensive player to win MVP, is it? And Aaron Donald had a case that when Cooper Kupp won it for the Rams. But I think, look, and again, Josh Sweat was immense. He was absolutely amazing. But I think the fact is that the defensive effort was spread so well around everybody. I mean, everybody just contributed. Zach Bond had his incredible catch. I thought Cooper DeJean was so composed for a rookie. Even before he had his pick 6, which was a terrible throw by a terrible decision by Mahomes to even throw it in over the middle that way. But he had a huge tackle for a loss earlier on. He was hitting his markers. He was exactly where he needed to be. We talked about Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, I mentioned Cooper DeJean, but it was just an incredible defensive performance across the board. And we talked about Patrick Mahomes seeing ghosts. Even those guys on the defensive line that didn't make the stat sheet, every time Patrick Mahomes turned around, they were after beating their man, and they were able to turn him away and turn him back, and they just created chaos. And I didn't realize until this evening they didn't blitz once. And how easy does that make things or how much easier does that make things for the linebacking core, the secondary, that they don't have to step up and double job, essentially, that they're able to take care of business and take care of the Hollywood Browns and DeAndre Hopkins and all these dangerous threats, and Travis Kelce over the middle, who again had a poor game statistically, poor game on the pitch, but you just have to credit that defensive effort across the board. And then if you look back at Jalen Hurts, I think, and I'm looking at it again in the American media, the big talk now is Jalen Hurts putting together not just a Super Bowl MVP performance, but is he putting together a CV worthy of a trip to Canton in years to come? Because he now has stood toe-to-toe with Mahomes on the biggest stage twice, and he outplayed him in a loss a couple of years ago, and he's done it again, and he blew Patrick Mahomes away in what he was able to accomplish. He was also their leading rusher.
I'm laughing, Kieran, because he's literally gone from
and that's
is he the weak link in the Eagles team to now they're fitting him for a gold jacket? Like, how quickly the narrative changes. We're so fickle.
I had that written down as well. We're like goldfish. We're just such short-term memories. That's exactly the conversation we were having. Is he the weak link in an otherwise dominant team? And we were, I think one of us even might have mentioned that's the reason that the Chiefs might win, is because they have the edge at quarterback, which is the most important position. But another thing that it went back, and we were aware of it, but it's staggering. Jalen Hurts hasn't lost a full game since week 2. I mean, the other loss that came to my mind, I'm open to correction there, but I mean, he didn't finish the game that they lost to the Commanders. It was his backup. Geez, I'm trying to think now. What's his name? Kenny Pickett finished that game. Hurts only had four pass attempts in that game. You can't really put that loss on him. He hasn't lost a full game since week 2. He's been totally consistent. And listening to, again, the American media hyping him up, and maybe I've heard public apologies from Dan Orlovsky, and they're really giving Jalen Hurts his flowers today. But in fairness, what I have heard is that looking at Jalen Hurts' performances in Super Bowls and what he's done for the Eagles since he came in, he's a winner. He mightn't jump off the stat sheet, but he's won at college. He's won now in the NFL. He's gone to the playoffs 4 straight times, 2 Super Bowls in his first 4 years as a starter. So does that change the bar that we measure, or the measuring stick for success in terms of quarterbacks?
And let's flip this around, and we've got plenty more to talk about in terms of the Eagles. But one of the things that I was thinking of looking at this game was what does Josh Allen make, and what do Lamar Jackson make of those performances? Because they have better teams than the Chiefs. To me, it removes the excuses for them. Josh Allen had a poor game in the AFC Championship, if he's honest with himself. A couple of turnover-worthy throws that he got away with. It just didn't happen for him, or he didn't happen. Certainly not in the way that Hurts handled his moments there. And you see the Chiefs exposed in the way they were, and the Bills wouldn't be too far off and they're not quite at the same caliber of that Eagles defense, but the Ravens certainly are in that zone, and the Ravens certainly have the kind of weapons that you would think should be capable of getting to the big game. If the Eagles can do that to the Chiefs in a big spot, I think you're now looking at even more pressure on Allen, on Jackson, probably less so Burrow, because he's beaten Mahomes even if he didn't actually win the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles they've certainly changed the narrative around themselves, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I think they've actually kind of changed a bit of the narrative around the AFC now. You're looking at these teams going, what's your excuse? These guys just dropped 40 points on the Chiefs and blew them out.
Yeah, and I think it's this element of swagger and coming in, sticking your chest out, and just not being fazed by the hype, by getting caught up in the we talked about the aura, the Chiefs aura. Maybe there's an element of being in the AFC and being closer to it. I talked about Rory McIlroy and his mental hang up with the majors there early on in the season, and it certainly seems like the Bills and the Ravens, and and I suppose those are the two teams mainly, Joe Burrow and the Bengals to a lesser extent. They seem to have that mental block of getting over the line.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of how Tyrone were always Kerry's kryptonite in the football. It didn't matter how well Kerry were going, Tyrone were just in their heads from before the game, and it wasn't it just wasn't a hurdle that Kerry could get over. I know we've seen the Chiefs beat the Eagles, so it's not a direct comparison, but some teams just match up against other teams particularly well.
Yeah, and again, but that Tyrone team, you mentioned them, you're talking about mental strength. Again, that's just absolute mental fortitude and, self-belief on another level. Like, it's the doubt. I think it's that doubt. And every year that the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jacksons don't get over the line, that doubt becomes bigger and bigger. It grows, it's infectious. And until you can get over it, it's always going to be a hang-up. We've talked about so many monkeys on so many backs now this year that it just seems to be a minefield, this AFC. But again, what yesterday did, or what last night did as well, it probably puts a little bit of pressure now on Patrick Mahomes, because all I'm hearing across America now is that the GOAT debate put to bed, which is a ridiculous argument because Mahomes is so much younger. He's achieved so much more at this level of his career than Tom Brady had, but he's now had 2 poor games and poor losses in Super Bowls, and people are talking about how much of a blot is that on his copybook in terms of legacy.
But isn't it interesting how it not directly, but it does almost mirror what happens to Brady in his career. And Brady talked about it on Fox in the build up to the game. For anyone who was watching it on Game Pass, he said, I remember my first 3 Super Bowls. He's like, to be honest, that early in my career, 3 Super Bowl wins, I'm thinking this is kind of easy. And he said, I should never have thought that way. But then it's 10 years and it's 2 losses to the Giants. And suddenly I realized just how much it actually takes and how difficult it actually is to climb the mountain. And you don't ever take it for granted ever again.
Yeah, and like if you look at the longevity of Tom, or the timeline of Tom Brady's career, Patrick Mahomes now has 7 years in the league. That brings Tom Brady up to 2008. So he would go on to lose another 2 Super Bowls and win 3. Am I right? He went to he won another 4. Sorry, because he won another 3 with the Patriots and another 1 with the Bucks and lost another 2. Yeah. So anything can happen in this league, and there's no guarantees that Mahomes will ever get back again. But you have to. You have to almost expect that he will, because that is his level of greatness, and he will be back. But yeah, the big talk in the US about the GOAT debate today. That's what I love about this sport, is that there's no end of talking points, 365 days a year, and that'll ramble on for the next few months as well.
We've lots more stuff to talk about here, because one of the things I wanted to get to is Nick Sirianni. And again, we're talking about how fickle we are and flipping narratives. This is a guy who was under legitimate job pressure this time last year. The Eagles had collapsed down the stretch after, tearing out the doors at the start of the season, going 10-1. It all fell apart. The team is fighting with each other. Fingers are being pointed at Sirianni, saying he's not the leader. It's too much about him. His antics, they're great when you're winning, but it's tearing the locker room apart. He hired the wrong defensive coordinator. He booted Sean Desai out, brought Matt Patricia in. That wasn't working. Everything was coming apart at the seams. And now, maybe he's not the offensive wunderkind in the way that a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay is, but maybe he's more the conductor of the orchestra. And, he in his own way has rehabilitated both Kellen Moore post the Dallas exit, and Vic Fangio after what happened in Denver. Last time we saw Vic Fangio in the playoffs, his Dolphins team were being dismantled by the Chiefs. This time, with more talent at his disposal, he lays a beatdown for the ages on the great Andy Reid.
Yeah, and you were asking me about Nick Sirianni last week, and I was stuttering because I could not think of a reason. I could not figure out how he has turned this around, and how I've talked so negatively about him this season.
Yeah. Maybe he does that thing that some great leaders too, hire great people and stay out of their way.
And that's the point that Brian made. To be fair, Brian said maybe he's just one of these people who puts good people around him. But I listened to Colin Cowherd today, and he was speaking to LaShawn McCoy, and LaShawn was saying that he's still very close to a lot of the people in that locker room, and he knows Nick Sirianni, and he loves him. And he said the players love him. And Philadelphia is a chaotic city, and the fans are chaotic. It's noisy and it's bustling. And he said they love that. They love that Nick Sirianni gets stuck in coaches and that he gets stuck in the fans. And, you know, they have no problem with that. It's us on the outside looking in saying that's not the charisma that you need to be a head coach in the league. So, look, the first thing I think you need to have is you need to have the locker room. And it might not always appear like he does from the outside, but if the people on the inside are telling you that he's respected and he's well liked in the locker room, that goes a long way to success. As you said, if he's got the right people around him. And look, I've already mentioned that I saw a huge level of maturity in Kellen Moore in the game he called, and great deal of respect for how the offense played out. But Vic Fangio as well, we've been speaking very highly of him all season. He's been a huge reason for the success of the Eagles. And I think, you know, if you're the Eagles, what you'd hope to see now is maybe we've got a Steve Spagnuolo situation where this guy has been around the league a long time. He's dabbled in head coaching. It hasn't worked out for him, and maybe he's saying this is my strength and this is where I want to be, and I might stay here for a long time now. And you know, you never know how much success I might have because this is a young team. We talk about their well developed. You've spoken about Howie Roseman a lot and the GM and how he's set this team up for success in the long term. So maybe Vic Fangio says, I don't need to be anywhere else. I don't need to be in the shop window for anybody now. This is where I am, and who knows where it takes them.
I have to say, with my Bears hat on, I'm delighted for Fangio. And David Haw tweeted something last night which really struck a chord with me, and you know, he expressed it much better than I would have done. But I've been thinking along similar lines myself. Vic Fangio had an unbelievable defense with the Bears in 2018. It was the best defense in the league. You know, a lot of people forget this, but the Bears had completely shut down that explosive Rams offense, that sensational Sean McVay offense when Jared Goff was quarterback, and the Patriots took exactly the same blueprint and used it in the Super Bowl with, you know, the Bill Belichick imprimatur on it. Belichick, you know, rightly got the credit for implementing a successful game plan, but he'd done what all great coaches did. He magpied it from Vic Fangio. Once Fangio had an offense just worthy of his defense, if you like, he was perfectly capable of winning the ring, and he's gone and done it. I couldn't be more delighted for him. But let's talk a little bit about where it went wrong for the Chiefs, because you know, for all the plaudits rightly that we've given Spagnuolo and Reid, I don't think either of them actually covered themselves in glory here. And you know, from Spag's point of view, we talk about the amount of trust he puts in the players, and maybe it's unfair to blame him because penalties on the defensive side of the ball, some of them inexplicable, like a particularly stupid late hit by Nick Bolton, who I imagine was very frustrated at that point in the game on Saquon, which Eagles were heading for a 3rd and 26 based on the previous play. And you get now first down and a roughing the passer, an unnecessary roughness penalty that keeps the drive alive. Now, the Eagles didn't score on that, but they ended up pinning the Chiefs back. And when they get the ball back, they do rumble down the field and score. And you just think these were the kind of mistakes that other teams were making against the Chiefs. And I guess maybe the point is that the Chiefs were forcing other teams to make, and they didn't really enjoy the taste of their own medicine. And ultimately, they went contra to what we've been saying about them all along. They didn't handle the big moments well, and it cost them badly.
Yeah. And we, you know, one thing we did, I certainly got wrong, is predicted that the Chiefs wouldn't make mistakes, that's how they win. They bend, don't break, and they don't make these mistakes. And yeah, like that was crazy. That 3rd and 26, you've spelled it out exactly as I've written it down. Like it kept a drive going for the Eagles. It stopped a turnover for the Chiefs at that, and it was such a needless hit. The ball was gone. The ball was out, and even though it didn't lead to any particular.
And Barkley hadn't even done anything. It's not like Bolton could have been particularly taking it out on him. Like the guy barely touched the ball at that point in the game.
But the ensuing punt, and it's just the effect that these things have. The ensuing punt went to what I found out was called this year was Coughlin Corner. It went right into the right to touch again. And that led to the Zach Bond interception a couple of plays later. So, you know, these things have a ripple effect. And you talked about mistakes. Patrick Mahomes is probably, he finished with a QB rating of 11.4. And that's with his garbage time yards and touchdowns. You know, like the Chiefs had 23 net yards in the first half. And I listened to Mark Schlareth, who you had on a couple of weeks ago, and it was really, really interesting to listen to him talk about offensive line play as well. And the offensive line was a clear point of weakness for the Chiefs because they got absolutely manhandled. We talked about maybe the reluctance to move Joe Thuney back to his more natural position, and they were just beaten to a man. And Mark Schlareth said today. He said, how do you shut down a defense that's coming at you and consistently winning at the line of scrimmage? You run the ball. And it seemed like Andy Reid was a bit reluctant to adjust, that maybe he just felt like I've got my plan, I'm sticking with it, and Mahomes is going to be Mahomes and Kelsey's going to be Kelsey. They didn't put in the hands of Pacheco or Hunt just to ask questions of that defense, just to maybe force Fangio to make a few adjustments, maybe to ramp up a blitz or two, and then open things up for Mahomes in the passing game. So those kind of mistakes were very unchief-like, if you know what I mean. So they were, while credit goes to the Eagles in what they managed to do on every side of the ball, you would say that the Chiefs, to an extent, were architects of their own downfall in a little bit of, call it, I don't know, would it be stubbornness or would it be just a reluctance to adjust? I don't know. But yeah, not Andy Reid's best day out and not Mahomes' best day out either.
No, I couldn't agree more, particularly with what you said about the running game. I think that's absolutely spot on. They came out after halftime. Pacheco got a good couple of carries on one particular drive, and then it was negated after they moved the sticks because Mahomes took those two sacks back to back from Josh Sweat. I think on both of them, or it might have been Sweat and Jalix Hunt on those two sacks, but. It's like Schlereth had said, you throw 3 straight incompletions, you don't get away from the passing game. You got to commit to the running. You had to keep that Eagles pass rush honest, and you had to ask questions of them in a different way, and you had to maybe just buy Mahomes a bit of breathing space and give the Eagles something else to focus on, so that you could spring guys open in the intermediate and the short passing game where the Chiefs are normally able to go to work. A couple of other things I wanted to highlight was just, to the team you've been talking about there, uncharacteristic drops by Kelsey, by Hollywood Brown, by DeAndre Hopkins, who absolutely drops he's wide open and would have cantered in for a touchdown. Like, it's just like inexplicable compared to what we've been talking about and what we've seen from the Chiefs in these moments all along. Like, they look like the team that was nervy, and they look like the team, to your point, that was making the mistakes that other teams normally make against them. Like, I wouldn't use a word like complacency, because we know that doesn't exist in Chiefs world. They wouldn't have the Lombardis in the cabinet that they have under Andy Reid and with Patrick Mahomes as quarterback over the last couple of years, if that was the case. They just looked like they'd kind of run out of steam. They looked like ultimately that the Eagles just absolutely had their number, and they actually just didn't have any answers. Like, you talked about it earlier, and you planted a seed in my head about the pressure that Mahomes was under, and you compared it to Super Bowl 57. Bill Barnwell had an excellent piece of analysis on ESPN earlier today, just talking about how the pressure rate, Super Bowl 57 to 59, was almost identical. Eagles were, I think, 37% pressure rate on Mahomes' dropbacks in Super Bowl 57, 38. So only 1 percentage point in the difference between those two Super Bowls. But the key differentiator between those two Super Bowls is that they just did not let him escape. They forced him to advance into the pocket where he was going into the teeth of these monster trucks that they have on the D-line. They wouldn't let him get outside the hash marks, and wouldn't let him go to work. Wouldn't let him scramble and do those dangerous off-platform throws that he could make. He never had the opportunity to hurt them. It's like Fangio had watched the tape inside out and said, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us a different way, because I'm not going to let that happen in the way it happened in the last Super Bowl. And it wasn't just the defensive scheme, and it wasn't just the performances of that D-line. It was that they anticipated everything that the Chiefs would try to deploy against them, and they neutralize it. And it's just so unusual, and we're just so unused to seeing the Chiefs handled like that. I mean, this, to me, I'd be very interested to see where they come back, and I'm sure they'll be, they have the well of pain to draw on now. But this was also, I think, a very dispiriting loss. I think it'll take them a long time to recover from it, because it's not even close. They just had there was no way they were going to win this game in the way that the Eagles played, and that's a tough place to be. That's a humbling place to be.
It is, and I suppose they'll have their questions to answer now in the off season. I think on a positive note, for the most part, they still have the pieces that they didn't have consistently all year. I mean, they'll have, Pacheco will be fully fit hopefully next year, and Kareem Hunt, and you'll have Rashee Rice, and you'll be able to see more of him. You'll have you'll have Xavier Worthy in year 2, who showed levels of production. If even if he wasn't a consistent presence, he was that danger all through the season. you want to see Noah Gray step up, and then you'll have to ask the question: are they going to go shopping for a tight end to I suppose, cover the inevitable loss that is coming, whether it's next season or the year after, of Travis Kelce? The fact that Travis Kelce didn't get a ring last night might mean he'll stick around for another year.
Looks like Taylor Swift didn't get one either. The whole rumored or speculated upon proposal was not going to happen on that fateful night.
Yeah, and poor old Taylor had an awful time with the crowd as well. That was I felt you felt sorry for her, but
Eagles fans covering themselves in glory once again.
Yeah. Looking at a lot of the analysis again across the pond, the one thing that stood out is that when the Chiefs lost to, was it Brady in the Super Bowl, what they immediately did was they addressed the offensive line, and that's what they're going to have to do in the offseason. So whether it's draft, develop, trade, that's what they're going to be going out looking to do in the offseason. And if they do that, who's to say they won't be they won't be the standard bearers again next year and for the next few years to come.
We kind of are where we were then, because it's questions asked of the remaining AFC teams around them as to whether they can take advantage of the Chiefs in a perceived state of vulnerability in the way that the Eagles were able to do. I mean, if you're looking at these two teams, as you say, I'm not going to feel sorry for a team that has Patrick Mahomes as quarterback, Andy Reid as coach, and Steve Spagnuolo as their DC, with all the pieces that they still have in place. Chris Jones isn't going anywhere either. They got Trent McDuffie and all those standout and high caliber playoff players that they are, never mind what they did in the regular season. But you look at these two teams and you think the Eagles are the more likely to be sticking around for the time being. Like, granted, you got the Lions and you got others. You can't imagine the 49ers necessarily having another down year in the NFC, so you take nothing for granted. But if you're looking at which one of these teams is most likely to run it back, I'd be saying Philadelphia right now rather than the Chiefs. So it kind of surprised me that the power rankings, one of the power rankings I saw, had the Eagles as like 4th or 5th. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. Have we slipped right back into underestimating them again?
Was that today? Like that they were ranked 4th after last night? That seems a bit crazy. I know. Look, you've got the
Ravens, Bills, Lions, and the Chiefs all ahead of them. I wouldn't necessarily have thought that was the case. I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, I think the Lions have another twist in them. I think that Ravens team is so high caliber. I think they've such a good roster, and I think the Bills probably have a little bit of work to do, and they won't be too far off. But I thought that was very disrespectful to a team that's just won the Super Bowl in dominant fashion and put up 90 points over 2 playoff games, 95 points.
It seems and again, a young team as well, the 3rd youngest roster in the league. So, I think a lot will tell based on who has the best offseason now again, and that'll be the next conversation. The draft and the free agency. Who's going to go out and get Myles Garrett, or is anybody going to get Myles Garrett? Max Crosby. Who's going to go out and get the difference maker? If
Harry Roseman finds a way to get Myles Garrett into Philadelphia, we'll just all give up and go on.
Yeah, I actually thought that's what the Ravens did last year. I thought them getting Derrick Henry was the key, and that's why the Ravens were my Super Bowl pick this year. I thought that's all they needed to get over the line. But who knows? Maybe they go out and try and, although he's within the division, they're not going to get him, trade Myles Garrett to the Ravens, you'd imagine. But
who would do a thing like that? Trade a magnificent player within the division? Yeah, you'd never see that happen. Shout out to Saquon. Shout out to Joe Shane.
Yeah, I think Brian is in the air now, I'd say. So lucky he's not listening to us at the moment. So they'll those Giants fans are still sick, I'd say, after last night watching Saquon. But look, that's why, again, we talk about it so often here. That's why the NFL is so intriguing and the American sports is so intriguing, because they do make it, they do market it so well and time it so well that we get to talk about this almost year round. I mean, it's not going to be the draft isn't going to be too far away now again, at the combine before that. So there's going to be lots to talk about, and it's not as if we're going to stop planning and predicting next season, because there's just so much material for us to get through.
Yeah, so true, Kieran. We're looking forward to getting through it all as we go into the off season now. There never isn't something to talk about. Blessed are the script writers, of course. I feel sorry for the conspiracy theorists now, because the refs didn't fix the game for the Chiefs after all that. What do you know? That turned out to be a bit of a damn squib. As did the Super Bowl, unfortunately, from a neutral's perspective. But that should take nothing away from the Philadelphia Eagles, who sit atop the mountain once again for their 2nd Super Bowl, having dispatched the Chiefs and consigned the three-peat bid to history. Thanks for listening to us on the Irish NFL Show. We'll talk to you again real soon.